In 2014, LinkedIn made a bet that seemed like a sure thing. They had 53 million users in China, Microsoft backing, and a brand that every MBA graduate recognized worldwide, and they still failed spectacularly. By 2023, LinkedIn China was dead, shut down, packed up, and gone. Here's what keeps me up at night about that story. It wasn't because they didn't try. They translated the interface, they got the ICP license, they stored data in China, and they checked every box on the How to Enter China checklist. And they still lost to a startup called Maimai that basically built anonymous workplace gossip into a professional network. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 3 traps that kill even the smartest foreign companies in China, and the one rule that could have saved LinkedIn and might save you. I'm your host, and this is China Business Insider. Let's start with the trap that feels the most obvious, but somehow still gets everyone: the translation trap. When LinkedIn entered China in 2014, they did what every sensible company does. They hired translators, they localized the interface, and they made sure the word connect was properly translated instead of using some awkward machine translation. They even added WeChat integration, which for a foreign company in 2014 was actually pretty forward-thinking. But here's the thing they missed: Chinese professionals don't network like Americans do. Let me give you a contrast. In the US, LinkedIn works because there's a cultural script around professional networking. You meet someone at a conference, you connect on LinkedIn, you endorse their skills, and maybe you message them about a job opportunity. It's transactional, it's structured, and it's professional. In China, that script doesn't exist. Chinese professionals build relationships over dinner, over drinks, and through warm introductions from mutual friends. The idea of sending a cold connection request to someone you met once at a conference, that's not networking. That's being weird. And this is where the translation trap gets insidious. It's not about the words, it's about the behavior the product assumes. LinkedIn assumed Chinese users would fill out detailed professional profiles, post career updates, and engage with professional content the same way Americans do. But why would they? They already have WeChat for everything. Their professional relationships live in group chats, not public profiles. This isn't just a LinkedIn problem. Let me tell you about KFC's entry into China in the 1980s. They brought their famous slogan, "Finger lickin' good," and the translation came out as "eat your fingers off." Not exactly appetizing. Or Coca-Cola, whose initial Chinese name sounded like "bite the wax tadpole" when pronounced. Again, not what you want in a beverage. But here's the key difference: KFC and Coke fixed their translation problems. They hired better translators, got better names, and moved on. LinkedIn's problem wasn't translation, it was assumption. They assumed the underlying behavior would be the same. And this brings us to the second trap, which is where things get really expensive. In 2021, LinkedIn made a decision that probably seemed smart in a Seattle boardroom. They launched In Career, a stripped-down, China-only version of LinkedIn that focused on job postings and removed the social feed entirely. The logic was sound. China's regulatory environment was getting tougher, so let's create a simpler, more compliant product. It lasted 2 years. Here's what LinkedIn missed while they were busy simplifying. Their competitor Maimai was doing the exact opposite. Maimai looked at how Chinese professionals actually behave and built features that seemed unprofessional by Western standards, but perfect for China. Anonymous workplace reviews? Check. Gossip about which departments are getting laid off? Check. Salary transparency, so you know if you're being underpaid? Absolutely. By 2023, Maimai had over 120 million users, and LinkedIn had shut down completely. This is the business model trap. It's not that LinkedIn had the wrong features, it's that they had the wrong fundamental approach to making money. Let me explain. In Silicon Valley, there's a playbook called Product-Led Growth, or PLG. The idea is simple. Give users a free version of your product, let them experience the value themselves, and then convert them to paid plans. Dropbox did this, Slack did this, and it works because American users are comfortable trying software on their own without talking to a salesperson. China has a different playbook. It's called Be Free for as long as it takes to build an ecosystem. then monetize through transactions, not subscriptions. Look at DingTalk, Alibaba's workplace app. It was free for years, built a massive user base, and now they make money through enterprise services, cloud integration, and marketplace transactions, not by charging users monthly fees. Or Feishu, ByteDance's answer to Slack. Also free for the base product. They monetize through advanced features, sure, but the core strategy is ecosystem lock-in, not direct subscription revenue. LinkedIn's model was free basic profile, charge for premium features like seeing who's viewed your profile or sending messages to non-connections. In China, those features weren't valuable enough to pay for. Chinese users already had WeChat for messaging. They didn't need LinkedIn's paid messaging. But here's the deeper issue. LinkedIn was trying to sell a product, while Chinese competitors were building infrastructure. DingTalk isn't just a chat app, it's the operating system for how many Chinese companies run their entire business. Feishu isn't just Slack, it's integrated with ByteDance's entire ecosystem. LinkedIn was a tool, Maimai was becoming a platform. And that brings us to the third trap, the one that looks like a checkbox, but is actually a minefield. When LinkedIn announced they were shutting down in-career in 2023, their statement was carefully worded. They cited a significantly more challenging operating environment, which is corporate speak for. The regulatory situation became impossible, but here's what most people miss about that statement. LinkedIn had been dealing with Chinese regulations since 2014. They got the ICP license, they stored data locally, they complied with cybersecurity reviews, and they did everything you're supposed to do. The compliance trap isn't that regulations are hard, it's that they're unpredictable and they change the economics of your business in ways you can't plan for. Let me give you an example. In 2024, China updated its cybersecurity law. The new rules expanded data localization requirements. Even companies that weren't designated as critical information infrastructure operators, which LinkedIn wasn't, suddenly faced new restrictions on cross-border data transfers. What does that mean in practice? It means if you're a multinational company with a China operation, you can't just sync your Chinese user data with your global systems anymore. You need security assessments, you need approval, and you need legal teams in China interpreting rules that seem to change quarterly. For a company like LinkedIn, which was already struggling to make the business model work, these compliance costs were the final straw. It's one thing to pay for translation and localization, and it's another thing to maintain a completely separate technical infrastructure, legal entity, and data architecture just for one market. Compare this to how Chinese companies expand overseas. When ByteDance launched TikTok, they didn't try to adapt Douyin, their Chinese app. They built TikTok as a separate product with separate infrastructure. When Shein expanded globally, they built their entire supply chain outside China. Chinese companies know something that foreign companies entering China often forget. Sometimes, the winning move is to treat a market as completely separate and be willing to walk away if the economics don't work. LinkedIn wasn't willing to do that. They tried to make China fit into their global playbook, and when the compliance costs kept rising and the revenue never materialized, they had no choice but to leave. So, what's the lesson here? If you're a foreign company looking at China, what should you actually do differently? Here's my one rule. Don't adapt your product for China, adapt your business. And let me give you two examples of companies that got this right. Starbucks entered China in 1999. They didn't just translate the menu, they partnered with Alibaba to enable delivery, which was essential because Chinese consumers expected everything delivered. They accepted WeChat Pay and Alipay before most foreign retailers. And they built stores that were designed to be Instagram-worthy because Chinese consumers shop for the photo as much as the coffee. Nike didn't just open stores, they built live commerce operations on Tmall, they partnered with Chinese KOLs, and they created China-exclusive product drops that generated scarcity and hype. Both companies treated China not as a market to enter, but as a business to build. They hired local leadership with real decision-making power, and they were willing to try things that would never work in their home markets. LinkedIn did none of this. They translated, complied, and assumed. They treated China as a localization problem when it was actually a business model problem. The localization trap isn't about language. It's about the assumption that the world works the way your home market taught you it works. China doesn't. And the companies that win are the ones that learn that lesson before they run out of time. Next episode, we'll look at the flip side. A foreign startup that came to China with no brand recognition, no Microsoft backing, and somehow succeeded by breaking every Silicon Valley rule they knew. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Leave a review if you learned something. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, and this is China Business Insider.